Okay, so we'll skip 8.6 for now. We'll come back to that later and talk about mutations today. So a mutation is any change in DNA, and it may or may not affect the phenotype. So it can be harmful, but not always. It just depends. So there's a lot of mutations that happen that we don't even know about because they don't change anything about you. They don't change the protein, they don't change the appearance or the functioning of the body. And so we don't even know they exist, but many mutations happen that way where you do have a mistake in the code, but no change in how it works. Or you can have severe mutations where it changes the code so much that you see a complete difference in the protein, which will change the functioning to be harmful or not working at all. And so there's a wide range of mutations. Mutation we usually think of as bad, and many times they are bad, but they're not always bad. They can be harmless, or they can be good mutations. So sometimes mutations can actually be good for the person or for the animal.
So why can viruses mutate so easily?
Because they're constantly reproducing. So when a virus enters the body, it will attach to a cell, and that cell becomes a factory to make more viruses. And each cell in your body will make, 50 to 100 to maybe 1,000 viruses each. And you have trillions of cells in your body. And so viruses can duplicate and multiply so quickly. Every time there's a reproduction, making more of that same virus, there's a chance for a mistake in the code. And that's why we see with COVID, for example, there's a new strain in South Africa that people are worried about. It's constantly mutating and changing. And sometimes it can change where it's nothing that's going to be different in how it works. Other times we can see a big change in how it works. And so it just depends on the mistake in the code. But the more people who are sick from COVID, the more mutations you're going to see. So the more it's spread, you're going to see more and more changes in mutations. Blocking the words, that's strange. I wonder why that's doing that. Huh. I wonder, try turning your video off, Jordan, see if that works. See if your video is maybe doing that. Let me know if that changes anything. So one way to prevent mutations, especially in viruses, is just to prevent the spread. And that's why, we're wearing a mask or social distancing, where vaccines are now becoming more common, because those are all ways that you can limit the spread of the virus, which doesn't just keep you from getting sick, but also prevents mutations from happening, which is also important. Because the new virus strain in South Africa may not work with the vaccine as well. They're not for sure, but it's possible it might not. And so there's a concern about that. And so they do want to limit the spread of the virus so that there's no changes in how the virus works. The virus has a spike protein, which is like the key, which unlocks the cell membrane. But if you change the way the key is arranged, then it doesn't work on the vaccine. You have to get a whole new vaccine for it to work. So hopefully it doesn't mutate enough for that to happen. At this point, it's not, but it could in the future. But what's good about the vaccine is that it's not hard to change the vaccine to accommodate for new strains. So if it is the case where we do have a new strain of the virus where we can't use the vaccine for, it wouldn't be hard to change the vaccine to also accommodate for the new strain. So that's one good side from this. Some mutations affect a single gene, others the entire chromosome. Did that help, Jordan, or you still not be able to see everything? Because I don't know, I don't see them on my page blocking it, so I'm not sure what. Let me just go.
It's like a little square that's
Oh, you know what? I'm seeing what you're seeing now. Okay, I see. Yeah. Okay, that should fix it. Did that work?
Yeah, could you go back just for a second?
Sorry. There we go. Okay, so sometimes they can affect the entire gene or the entire chromosome. Others affect just one nucleotide. Just depends on the mutation that you're looking at. But any mutation is a change in the DNA of the organism. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . mutations can be things like changing the hair color. Like blonde hair for humans is a mutation. At one time, humans only had dark hair, but then one person was born with a mutation that made them blonde hair. Red hair also is a mutation that happened. Blue eyes is a mutation. People at one time only had brown eyes and brown hair. But so mutations don't always mean bad things. It just mean changes, which can be neutral or even good. It just depends on the kind of change you're talking about. So giraffes have a longer neck through mutations, and that helps them get leaves off the tree. So mutations can be beneficial for creatures too. Polar bears mutated to get white hair, white fur, which lets them blend in with their surroundings and catch more fish. So a black bear would not do well up north because they would just stand out in the snow. So we'll look at different kinds of mutations. One kind is called a point mutation, where you have one nucleotide changed on the strand. So you can see it right here. So it's just one nucleotide that's different than before. So over here, we can see there was a C. A mutation, though, put an A in place of the C. That's called a point mutation when you have one change in the nucleotide base. What happens? Well, if it's a bad mutation, then you're going to see the protein affected. What's happened here? This codon over here coded for glutamine. This one codes for aspartic acid. Two different amino acids. Is that bad for the person? Well, we're not for sure, because it's possible that aspartic acid acts in a similar way to glutamine. If these act in a similar way, then it would not harm the person. If they act in a very different way from each other, then it could be harmful or even beneficial. Depends upon what changes about the protein.
What happens if like a start protein is mutated, then where does the start protein?
Then that would be a huge error. So yeah, if you don't have a start protein or a start, you can't make the protein at all. So then you would not have protein produced, which would be a really harmful gene mutation at that point. So some are very, like if it affects the stop or the start codon, that would be a very harmful mutation. One that just changes one amino acid, it may or may not be harmful. It just depends. Or possibly it can make it work even better. That also can happen. So I'm going to go through a few examples of mutations in the sentence structure. So this sentence right here gives you an idea. The cat ate the rat. That's a message in that message that is being sent out. But if you change one letter. So I added, instead of an E, I put an A. It sounds the same. You read it out loud, it sounds the same to you. So these two sentences read out loud, even though you changed the letter right here, the message is still the same to you. You still get the same message because reading out loud, it sounds the same. Whether you read the top sentence, the bottom sentence, you pronounce THE, the same as THA. So you don't know anything different about those two. So that can happen too, where it's a different amino acid, but it's not a difference in the way it comes across, the way it works. Sickle cell anemia is an example of a point mutation. So this happens when you have the blood cells in this shape, a crescent moon shape, compared to a circular shape. So they get stuck in these small passageways in these capillaries right here. When they get stuck, they can cut off blood supply to organs. That leads to pain, leads to damage to organs. It could be very serious in those situations. But it's due to one mutation so this is harmful to you. So one change in nucleotide can lead to a harmful change. Not always, though. Yeah.
Isn't sickle cells useful though if you're living in Africa?
Is it what?
Isn't it useful though?
That is a good point. Do you know why it's useful in Africa?
Yeah, because malaria does not attack sickle cells quite like it does.
Yeah. So that's a very good point to bring up, because so over here in America, sickle cell anemia is really bad. But you're right, in Africa, even though it is a disease which can harm you, it can save your life because malaria is life-threatening. And you are immune to malaria if you have sickle cell anemia. And so that's one reason why we see it very common in Africa. It helps give you immunity to malaria, which kills millions every year.
Can sickle cell anemia look weird?
It can be deadly. It's just not as deadly as malaria, not even close to the same. Malaria is very, very deadly. And sickle cell anemia, it can be, but generally it's a lot less severe than malaria is.
How does it make you immune to malaria?
We're not quite sure. So malaria, we do know, is a parasite in the blood, and it lives in the blood cells. So there's something about the shape of the blood cells that makes it inhospitable to the parasite that causes malaria. And they're not quite sure why, but somehow it can't survive in those blood cells when they're sickle cell shaped. And because of that, you don't get malaria. But they're still not quite sure how it works. They just know it works. So another kind of mutation, which is more harmful to the DNA usually, is a frameshift mutation, where you have an insertion or a deletion of a nucleotide, which then causes the order to change in all the rest of the strand. So point mutation only changes one nucleotide. It, at most, will change one amino acid. Frameshift mutation changes everything after it's the mutation. So from here onward, you will have all different bases. So this shows you why. This shows you why it's a lot more harmful. So we deleted E right here. And what happens? So remember, it's 3 letters each. So the codons are read 3 letters at a time. And so without an E, we now put the C over with these and go from there. And now it's just all nonsense. So now we have a nonsensical word, which means it's not useful to us. And so the whole sentence has changed to the point where it can't be used. Same thing with proteins. Proteins are also, at this point, non-usable usually with the frameshift mutation. So these are usually much more harmful diseases. So everybody have these ones down? Another example would be this one, where we added a letter. So the other example, we deleted E, now we added an extra E right here. Same exact thing. You can see it's all nonsense. By adding an E right here, the whole sentence is also changed. So whether you delete or add a letter, we don't get any message being sent at that point. So if all we do is change one letter and substitute in, then we might have a sentence that works. Other times it might not be. So if we were to put an R in here instead of a C, the rat ate the rat, well, that changes the meaning of the word. And so you could then have a point mutation be harmful in that sense. But frameshift makes it even more likely that you're going to have nonsense. Almost always it'll be nonsense, which means you almost always will have a harmful mutation.
So what kind of mutation is like
Blonde hair, I'm not sure, but generally ones are not well, I guess you could say they could be harmful because it can destroy the pigment. So that's really, if you have light skin, light hair, you have less pigment. And so in that sense, it could have destroyed the pigment, which can cause that to happen. I'll look it up and see. I'm not sure which one that would be called. Yes.
I'm pretty sure blonde hair for your skin is an advantage in polar climates. That's why all the Europeans do.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's right. You get more vitamin D with fair skin. Vitamin D is very important. And people who are really dark skinned up north aren't going to do very well in the wintertime, especially. But throughout the year too, because less vitamin D will cause a lot of problems. So that is true. You have an advantage if you have pale skin living up north.
So is hair color caused from melanin or is it just?
Yeah, it's caused by different kinds of, not just melanin, but pheomelanin, eumelanin, different pigments that can cause different hair colors. So the amounts of those pigments will cause different colors in your hair. Cystic fibrosis is an example of frameshift mutation. So it's a very harmful mutation, life-threatening disease, where the mucus in the body is very thick. It sticks to your organs, especially the lungs, and harms those organs and destroys them over time. So it could stick to not just the lungs, but pancreas, liver, really anywhere in the body. It can cause multiple organ failure as the person gets older. So it's hard to live a long life with this disease. Normally you have to get organ transplants, especially lung transplants, because your lungs get so damaged just in a few decades from this disease. So it's a very harmful mutation. It's a frameshift mutation.
What's it caused by?
Oh, was it caused by a mutation in chromosome number 7? And by changing this gene right here, it changes the amount of sodium in your body, which then will make the mucus very thick. Sorry, chloride, not sodium chloride.
What type of mutation was it?
It's a frameshift.
So if it gets like stuck in your lungs, does it make it like really hard to breathe?
That's right. They have a hard time breathing. Yeah. And so every morning they have to get hit on the back to loosen up the mucus in their lungs and in their throat. So yeah, they can suffocate to death because they just it gets blocked in their throat or in their lungs. It's a very, very difficult disease to live with.
If it increases, does it increase or decrease?
I think yeah, it's increased because they used to diagnose babies by dabbing their finger to their skin and touch and licking it. It smelled like it was salt so they could taste. The chloride gives you a salt taste. And so they had salty skin. So they had too much chloride on their skin. They could diagnose the baby that way.
So is there a chemical that decreases?
There is, but the problem with that is that if you decrease one, you increase the other one. And so you have to increase the sodium, which cause other problems too. So at this point, there's not good treatment as far as that goes, as far as decreasing chloride, increasing sodium. The best thing to do is to change the gene, just to repair the gene, which they're close to actually doing. Gene therapy could be an answer in the future where you actually put a virus into the body. That virus gives you a good gene, which makes the right protein, which then you're cured of the disease at that point. So that's a possibility. But that's only treatment we really have for it. We don't really know any other way to treat it besides just getting a healthy gene in the body. Caleb? No, asthma is different. I mean, it feels the same way though. You have the tightening of your air pipe, but it's a different reason. So for cystic fibrosis, you have mucus in your windpipe. For asthma, the windpipe itself gets swollen and closed up. And so it's a different reason. It feels the same way. You're choking, you're coughing, but it's for a very different reason.
If they put like a virus in the body to fix that, if it's a virus mutated, is
That would be a problem. Yeah, but it's a small risk to take for having this disease cured. But yeah, definitely would be a risk. But the idea would be that the virus will only be there for a little bit of time. It's a cold virus, and colds you get recover from pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so you would kill the virus pretty quickly. At that point, it wouldn't be in your body anymore.
Don't you like produce more mucus when you have a cold though?
That's right. It'd be a very, very mild virus to the point where it wouldn't really cause you to feel that sick. You can have a virus and not really feel sick from it. And that would be what you'd have. It'd be a very, very mild virus, which would just implant the gene into your body. That's all it would really do. It wouldn't cause you to feel sick.
I knew this girl with cystic fibrosis, and every morning she just like have to take these pills and she'd be completely fine.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I'm sure that some pills can help water down the mucus. I'm sure, just like we take cold medicine. I mean, it's not the same as that thing, but I would imagine that there are pills like that can help water down the mucus. And when she's young, especially, that can help. But as you get older, I mean, they do take lots of medicine. Medicine is very important. I mean, they helps a lot of different things, but it's a short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution.
Yeah, but doesn't the mucus kind of like settle down at the bottom of the lungs?
Yeah, it just progressively gets worse as you get older. there's nothing to do to stop the progression of the disease. It gets worse and worse pretty quickly. Usually by your 20s to 30s, without a lung transplant, you're just going to die in your 30s at latest. Usually 20 and 30s is as long as you can live without a lung transplant. With one, you can live a lot longer. Some can live well into their 60s or 70s. But even still with one, average lifespan is 5 years after a lung transplant. So you usually buy yourself 5 years after the transplant. But some can be a lot longer, live 15, 20, 30 years of lung transplant, others a year. Just depends on the person.
I guess if your body rejects the one.
Yeah, then that's, I mean, just in a week or two, that's it. I mean, so it is very risky because you have that risk of that happening. So
How far along is CRISPR?
maybe in the next decade. We're not for sure, but it's possible in the next decade, by 2030, it's possible you could have this be a reality where you could change your genes and treat and cure the disease through that. But nobody knows for sure.
And have they done Petri organs yet? Is that working?
I have not heard. I'm not sure about that. So I couldn't tell you about that. I just know that my guess would be the next decade, we would have the technology to cure this disease. But we'll have to just wait and see.
Is it exactly like normal to change your genes?
It can be for what, I mean, so if you want to change your genes to look better, to be taller, more muscular, that's wrong. That's immoral. If you want to treat a disease, yeah, that's moral to do that. So it's your reason behind it. That would make all the difference in the world. So if it's reason for vanity, then that's wrong. Reason to save your life, well, you can do that. So it just depends on, and also how you get the genes. But usually the genes are got in a moral way, usually using viruses, not living beings. So that is also moral to use a virus to transmit the gene to you, and that's totally fine.
So would it be immoral if they used gene transplants to lower risk of disease?
It depends the kind. If it's a very severe disease, yes.
Because for example, what if they used it on the whole population to remove predisposition towards depression?
Yeah. I mean, depression can be very deadly. It is a very serious. It's a very serious condition. So you could argue that would be a case when you could intervene, because depression does kill people every year. It is a very serious condition. So if they knew for sure, now they don't have a gene exactly that tells them this is for depression. They haven't isolated that gene yet. There are genes that might point to having depression, but they haven't just pointed to just one gene said that tells you have depression.
Yeah.
So until they could do that, there's no really way they could. But in theory, if you had that gene for depression and you could remove it, well, that would be moral. Now, as far as forcing the whole population to do it, that does not sound moral to me. But you could argue that doctors should give the option to people, which I think would be a good option to take, because depression is very serious. It is very deadly to people. And so that would be a good thing to cure if we could. Mutations can affect many genes too. So you can have several genes affected, not just one gene. So during crossing over, sometimes you have an incomplete crossing over, uneven crossing over. You see right here, you have a lot more purple than green. And so you have some genes that are duplicated on the purple. On the green, they're missing genes. So this one has duplicate genes. This one has missing genes. So in both cases, you're going to have not non-working proteins working incorrectly. You're going to have disorders for both of these examples.
So would that cause frameshift?
This would be different. This is called duplication. So this would be a duplication of the gene. Frameshift would be only on one gene where that gene is damaged. This would be having two of the same genes on a chromosome or missing a total chromosome. So this is usually more harmful than frameshift. So this would be even a more severe case of mutation than frameshift, where you have several genes affected, not just one gene affected. And usually these are deadly. And usually if you have this condition, it's generally going to be a deadly condition where you don't even survive childbirth. Or if you do, it's very severe. So the far right chromosome, the purple strand has 2 of the same genes right here. And the green one on this side is missing that gene. And we usually need every single gene in our body to survive. And so if we're missing a gene, we're not going to usually survive. And usually it's going to cause the baby to not be able to survive in the womb. That's usually a very, very severe condition. So these are all very rare. Thankfully, these only happen, 1 in every 2,000, 1 in every 3,000 cases at most. So they're not very common, but they do happen from time to time. And lots of times the babies who develop only are a few weeks old before and so lots of times the mom won't even know that the baby was even there because the baby was just so little, she had no idea. And so lots of times you have babies who are conceived that the parents don't even know were conceived. And so, when parents go to heaven, they might see a lot more kids than they even knew they had, because lots of times these babies are just so small, nobody even knows that they were there because they're just a few cells all in development.
What happens with gene duplication? Like if you have like what disorders?
It depends on the gene that's duplicated. And so it could be everything from, having nothing wrong with you to having nothing work at all in your body. Everything in between. So having 2 of the same genes can cause them to be harmful and not work at all, or work too much, or cause nothing to change. Just depends on the gene that's duplicated. So it could cause you to have darker skin. If you have 2 melanin genes, you might just have really dark skin. That would be a case when it might not be harmful to you. But generally speaking, it's almost always going to be harmful. Mostly because duplicated genes don't work well together. And usually you're going to have too much protein interfering with each other. And so it usually is going to be deadly. And anytime you have too much little protein, your body can't work properly. It's thrown out of balance, and then your body shuts down at that point. And so usually it's a non-functioning person when you have this happen to you. Your body just can't work properly. Too little protein on this side, too much on this side. And without the right balance, your body usually isn't going to be able to be healthy and stay functioning. Yeah.
So how is your body able to cross over completely?
Completely equal?
Yeah.
Usually they're lined up, chromosomes exactly lined up. And so because they're lined up exactly, they can cross over and be equal on both sides. Translocation is where one part of the chromosome breaks off and goes to a different part of the body. And that's what we see right here happen. We see that number 1 should be this length. But what happened is that number 17, the red part, broke off and joined number 1. And the part on number 1 joined 17. And so you have an exchange of DNA between non-homologous chromosomes. This usually is much worse than duplication of genes, but it just depends on where it's located. But usually this leads to protein not working at all. If it jumps to a totally different chromosome, it's like going to a different country and not knowing the language. If you go to Italy and only speak English, nobody there knows English, you can't speak with the people. They don't understand you, you don't understand them. You can't do anything if they don't understand you. You think about, you can't motion with your arms, you can't motion, you can't point to things. Just using your words, they won't understand you. That's what happens here. So this chromosome right here going to number 1, it's not understandable here. They can't use the protein properly here. And so it doesn't work. This is almost always deadly in this situation. So as we talked about, mutations may or may not affect the phenotype. It depends upon where they are, what kind of mutation you're talking about. But chromosome mutations, as we've shown, have a huge effect because it's at least one, if not several genes that are affected, and usually they can't work at that point. So gene duplication, gene deletion, translocation that involves chromosomes moving are usually a tremendous effect, usually very harmful, usually fatal. But the ones like point mutation, those can have smaller effects, which can change the phenotype, like from brown hair to blonde hair, cause you to be taller or shorter, which you can still survive, still live a normal life, but it just changes how you look. So those are smaller mutations that can even be beneficial to you, not harmful. Some mutations can cause a premature stop codon. And that would be a case when you'd have, it stops making the protein before it's supposed to, which usually is going to change how the protein works and will change your phenotype. It can also change the protein shape or the active site. And that would mean that the protein will work differently or not work at all. It can also change gene regulation, which means you might get more of a certain protein created, which can cause different things to happen. You might have too much growth hormone secreted, which means you're going to be very, very tall. Or just the opposite, too little growth hormone, you're going to be short. So those would be mutations where it could change your height based on the gene's work. So we have these ones down. Okay. This bottom picture shows you cystic fibrosis. This person's getting oxygen to help breathe. And this is her airways. You can see the blockage, the purple right here, the mucus that's clogging up her airways into her lungs.
Like if you're looking up or down your area?
Yeah, that's right. It's an up view. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And this is just a tube that goes into her lungs that you're seeing. Yeah. Get that one down. Some do not affect phenotype though. So you can have what's called a silent mutation, where you do have a change in the code, but the change in the code still gives you the same message. Like the original one I showed you, the cat ate the rat. If you change THE to THA, it's the same message. So nothing really changes. That's called a silent mutation, when the code, even though it has been changed, does not affect the message and so you still have the same protein. What can also happen is you can have mutation in the non-coding region. So most of the DNA in your body actually is not made of genes. Most DNA in your body, we don't know what it does, but might not do anything. So if you had that part damaged, then you wouldn't even know. So some mutations can still result in the same amino acid being produced, which would mean that it's the same protein being made, no change at all in the functioning of that protein. So one example of that would be if you had the codon AAG and that G changed to an A, you would have no effect at all because AAG and AAA both code for lysine, the amino acid lysine. So you still would get lysine either way. You had no change in your coding. And so that's what's a benefit of having a few codons for every amino acid. Because if there are some changes, they still give you the same amino acid and you would have no harmful mutation. And also, some amino acids work in a similar way to each other. And so even a change in the amino acid may not cause a big change in the protein working. Oh, sorry, let me go back. Here we go. So there really is a wide variety of mutations. Some can be good for the person. Some can, add desirable effects. Others can be very bad and deadly. It just depends on where it's located, what gene it's located at, and the kind of mutation you're talking about. Okay, these ones down. Also, mutations can happen later on in life. So some happen when you're a developing baby in the womb. Others happen when you're an adult. Through your environment, through sunlight, through microwaves, through plastics, through chemicals, through pollution. Mutations can happen through those kinds of situations, which may not harm you either. Sometimes they can be harmful if you affect a cell in such a way where that cell then grows and multiplies and spreads the mutation to other parts of the body. But if it's a mutation that only affects one cell and that cell dies, then you don't even know you have that mutation because that cell can't pass on its mutation to other cells.
Is cancer a mutation?
That's right, exactly. So cancer is caused by mutations that the cells then pass on to other cells and keep on growing and dividing.
So why is that mutation more common than like other mutations?
Any kind of cancer is a mutation, but it's a mutation that happens when you're older. So mutations that happen when you are developing as a baby would be ones that are disorders that are with you for life. And that can be a wide variety of things. But once you are an adult or even a child outside the womb, then the only kinds that can happen for mutations would be cancer types, where you have cells that are dividing, but they are working in a way that's not functioning to them. So cancer is just non-functioning cells that are growing in one place of the body. So if kidney cells are mutated, what that means is that you're growing new kidney cells, but don't work as kidney cells. And that's what we call cancer when that happens. So it can be any kind of damage to them, but just the damage that makes them not work. Actually, sorry, let's go here. So if you have a body cell mutation, that will not affect the kids that the parents have. So if a parent, goes out, gets a sunburn, and the sunburn causes them to have a mutation on their skin, the baby that they have won't have that mutation. They cannot pass that on to the baby because that's from their skin cells. If instead, though, the mother goes to get an X-ray, and the X-ray affects her egg cells and damages her egg cells, then the baby could have a mutation from those because the egg cells are passed on to the baby. So the sex cells, the egg cells, and the sperm cells, if those are mutated, then that could cause something to happen to the baby. So, and that can be harmful or beneficial. Sometimes you can have beneficial mutations. Natural selection can remove mutant alleles from a population when they are less adaptive. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you have a bad mutation in a population, like if you were to look at the bear population up north, they're all white colored. But if one bear were to have a brown-haired baby or a black-haired baby, that bear would not be able to survive up north the baby bear, after it grows and becomes an adult, couldn't catch food very well because it would stick out. So, I mean, in the snow, a black or brown bear will stick out. And so it wouldn't catch prey. It would die pretty early on, probably wouldn't have any children of its own to pass on the brown hair gene to the children. And very quickly, you would not have any brown hair bears in that area. So that's what they mean by natural selection. Bad genes are not passed on to offspring because those bad genes die out before they're passed on, usually. And the good genes, just the opposite. They survive, pass on to their babies. So replication errors can cause mutations. The DNA is copied, but copied incorrectly. That's an error in replication. So when you're replacing your cells, if you have an injury, if you're growing and you're replacing your cells, sometimes those cells are copied incorrectly. And that's a mutation when that happens. Besides just error in copying the DNA, though, you can have environmental changes that can affect your DNA. Those are called mutagens. Mutagens are things in your environment that can damage your DNA. So UV rays from the sun can damage your DNA. Chemicals can damage DNA.
So are carcinogens a specific type of mutagen?
Yeah, so that would be ones that can cause a damage to your genes that can cause cancer.
So is it like, so are carcinogens mutagens?
But they're more dangerous mutagens. So mutagens are ones that can cause a DNA change, but not always to the point where it can be damaging to your body. Carcinogens, though, can cause damaging cancer to your body. So yeah, they're worse. So they can be things like alcohol, cigarette smoke, radiation, microwaves, X-rays. They can be things like, even things like when I think about like popcorn fumes. If you have butter that is vaporized from the popcorn, that can be cancerous. So popcorn is safe to eat, but if you take the bag out of the microwave fresh with the steam and you're smelling or you're breathing in that steam from the butter, that can be cancerous. Diacetyl is a butter flavor that they use in popcorn. And if that is vaporized, that can cause cancer. That's why vaping is so dangerous, because vaping is the same exact thing. Vaping causes that oil, diacetyl, to become vaporized, and you are breathing in a carcinogen that can cause lung cancer.
So what about like just like normal butter?
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, because that can also become cancerous, not as easily. But anything that is vaporized that you breathe in is very dangerous to you. You just should. Well, that's a little bit different. So water is pure water. That's different. But anything besides water is usually you should not breathe it in if it's vaporized.
What's the difference between smoking and vaping?
Well, vaping is they have water with oils added to it. So you're not burning anything in vaping. Vaping is just vaporizing a liquid. Usually it's a water and oil-based liquid, along with flavorings that can be nicotine added to it as well, or other chemicals. But smoking is burning paper, and you're breathing the burning paper. They're both very bad for you.
What about inhaler?
An inhaler is totally different. So inhaler, you're breathing in things that are have been shown to only help you and not hurt you. There's medication that is a safe form of medication that is vaporized, but it's only helpful to you, not harmful to you.
If there like steam coming off your food, is that usually water?
Yeah, I mean, it almost is always water. So steam from a food is almost always just water. Now, if you're cooking with oil, that's a little bit different. You should step back from that and not have your face over it. If you're like frying something, that could be cancerous if you breathe that in. So you don't want to have your head right over, which usually I'm going to be anyway, but that could be a problem for you. Grilling things on the grill, the charcoal can be cancerous. So eating charred meat, the black part from grilling, that can be cancerous. So if it's just like a black line on the steak, I wouldn't worry about that. If it's like a large black chunk, I mean, usually I'm not saying it's nasty, but the black charcoal can be cancerous too on meat.
What about if you're like a diffuser?
A diffuser,
Yeah.
those have not been shown to be a problem because it's not actually vaporized. It's actually just small liquid particles still. So diffuser actually is still oil droplets, but not actually vapor. It's still water or it's still oil droplets. So as far as we know, those are not dangerous. They're shown to be safe.
What about completely like burnt marshmallow?
Yeah, I mean, if it's really black on the outside, it is a risk. Now, is it a big risk? No, it's a small risk. It's a very small risk. I mean, you have more risk getting cancer go out in sunlight, on a hot summer day without sunscreen. That's more dangerous than marshmallow that's burned. But it's a risk. Yes. What about what? But burning wood?
Yeah, is that bad?
I mean, you don't want to breathe in the smoke if you can avoid it. Like, you don't want to be right by the fire breathing the smoke. For homework tonight, 8.7, it's 1 through 6. 8.7, it's on page 241.
Can you send me the questions?
Yes, I'll do that, Jordan. Yes.
Thank you.
Have a good day.